I didn't plan to destroy my life that morning. But as the veil flew from my head and the sound of my own heartbeat drowned out the wedding march, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. My heels scraped across the marble floor of St. Augustine's church, my lungs burning, my bouquet discarded somewhere behind me like a symbol of all the lies I'd just escaped. People shouted my name, my mother's sharp voice slicing through the air, the groom's confused cry echoing down the aisle. But I didn't look back. I ran. The sunlight outside was blinding, so bright it made the world look like a dream I didn't belong in. The dress tangled around my legs, and I nearly tripped as I bolted down the church steps, clutching layers of lace in my fists. My car was parked 2 blocks away, but I didn't make it that far, because fate, or maybe karma, had other plans. The street was a blur of white fabric, blaring horns, and screeching tires. I dashed across without thinking, and that's when I heard it, the unmistakable growl of an engine, deeper and meaner than any car I'd ever known. My heart skipped. I turned just in time to see the glossy black hood of a Bentley sliding toward me. It wasn't fast enough to kill me, but it was fast enough to change everything. The world tilted. I hit the pavement hard, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. My vision fractured into shards of light and confusion. I heard a door slam, expensive shoes clicking rapidly across asphalt. Then a voice, a man's voice, cut through the chaos like a blade. "Are you out of your damn mind?" It wasn't the tone that startled me. It was the calm buried beneath it. Controlled fury wrapped in authority. I blinked up and for the first time saw him. Tall, dark suit. The kind of man whose presence didn't just command a room, it altered the gravity around it. His hair was black as midnight, combed back with ruthless precision. There was something wrong about his calmness, something too practiced, too deliberate. He crouched down beside me, his eyes cold and calculating as they swept over my disheveled bridal gown. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, more to himself than to me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. All I could do was stare at him, breathless and dazed. A thin cut on my elbow was bleeding onto the pristine white lace of my dress. The sight of it almost made me laugh. Of course. I'd spent months preparing for a wedding that wasn't mine to begin with. One arranged, forced, painted over with smiles. And within minutes of running, I'd managed to literally crash into someone else's nightmare. I didn't mean to, I stammered. He raised an eyebrow, unamused. "You ran into the middle of the street wearing a wedding dress. What did you mean to do? Audition for a lunatic asylum?" Something about his tone snapped me out of my shock. I glared up at him, clutching the torn fabric of my gown. I was trying to leave. He gave a dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Clearly, a few bystanders were gathering now, whispering. My heart raced. If anyone recognized me, if word reached my family, they'd drag me back before the vows even finished echoing. Panic surged again, raw and suffocating. "Please," I said, my voice trembling. "Don't call the police." His expression flickered, curiosity replacing irritation. "Police?" I shook my head quickly, tears threatening to spill. I need to go. Please, just forget this happened." For a moment, he studied me like he was deciding whether to laugh or call for a tow truck. Then, unexpectedly, he stood up, slipped a hand into his pocket, and said in a quiet, dangerous voice, "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." He ignored me and held out a hand. "Get up," I hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust him. But the murmurs around us were getting louder, and the last thing I needed was a public scene. So I took it. His hand was warm, steady, and when he pulled me up, I realized he was stronger than he looked. Up close, he smelled faintly of smoke and something sharp. Leather, maybe. Or power. His eyes weren't just dark. They were merciless. "Name," he said. "What?" "Your name." I froze. I couldn't give him my real one. Not yet. "Evelyn," I blurted out. "Evelyn Hayes." His gaze lingered on me like he knew I was lying, but he didn't press. Instead, he glanced at his car, at the faint dent where I'd collided, and sighed. "You picked one hell of a day to ruin my morning, Evelyn Hayes." I swallowed. "I'll pay for the damage." He smirked faintly. I doubt that. Something about that smirk made my pulse stutter. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. The kind that came from someone who didn't have to bluff. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek phone, and made a call. His tone dropped low, calm but commanding. Whoever was on the other end must have been terrified of him. I could tell by the way his voice softened slightly, as if giving orders was as natural to him as breathing. When he hung up, he turned back to me. "You can't stay here." "Get in!" "What? No!" He didn't even glance at me as he opened the car door. "You're shaking. I'm bleeding. You're not going anywhere until I know you're not about to pass out in the middle of the street." "I'm fine," I lied. He looked at me again. And for a brief second, something almost human flickered behind his eyes. Concern, or maybe curiosity. Then it vanished. "Fine," he said. "Then walk." I hesitated. Behind me, a reporter's camera clicked. My breath hitched. That was all it took. I climbed into the car. The door shut, muting the world outside. Inside, it smelled of expensive leather and quiet power. He got in beside me, his hands steady on the wheel. "You can start explaining," he said, voice low, almost bored. I stared out the window, my reflection pale and ghost-like against the glass. "I just didn't want to marry him," he hummed softly, neither mocking nor sympathetic. "You ran away from your wedding?" "Yes," his jaw tightened, and straight into my car. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not a smile, more like disbelief. "You've got terrible timing, Mrs. Runaway." I didn't answer. I just sat there trembling, still half in shock, realizing that I'd escaped one trap only to fall into another I couldn't yet name. Outside, the church bells were still ringing, but I was already too far gone to hear them. When I woke up, I didn't know where I was. For a moment, all I saw was white. White silk sheets, white curtains, white walls that shimmered faintly in the dim morning light. It was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of air conditioning and the rhythmic thump of my heart. My throat was dry, my head pounding. I sat up too fast and pain shot through my side. My elbow was wrapped in clean gauze. My once immaculate wedding gown was gone, replaced with a loose shirt that wasn't mine. Soft cotton, faintly smelling of cologne and smoke. My pulse quickened. The events of the day before flooded back like shards of glass. The church. The running. The crash. The man. I swung my legs off the bed. The marble floor was cool beneath my feet. My bag, if I'd even had one, was nowhere in sight. No phone, no shoes, nothing. Just a view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. And the dizzying realization that I wasn't just in some apartment. This was a penthouse. The kind that only belonged to someone who didn't ask for permission. Was still processing when a low voice came from behind. Me. Finally awake. I turned sharply. He was standing by the doorway, a mug in his hand, shirt sleeves rolled up, the top buttons undone. Morning light caught in his hair, tracing the edge of his jaw. He wasn't the type of man you forgot after one meeting. And up close, in the quiet calm of morning, he looked even more dangerous. "You fainted," he said simply, taking a sip of coffee. "I didn't faint," I snapped, too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. "You hit your head, you bled all over my car seat, and then you passed out mid-sentence. That's fainting in my book." I looked away, cheeks heating. "You could have taken me to a hospital." "I could have." He leaned against the doorframe, watching me over the rim of his mug. But I didn't. The casual tone was what scared me most. He wasn't apologetic. He wasn't even curious. He was assessing me, quietly, like a man studying a puzzle. "Who are you?" I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. He smirked, the kind of smile that carried no warmth. "You first, Evelyn Hayes." The way he said the name made my stomach twist. He knew it was fake. "I told you," he cut me off. "You told me what you wanted me to believe." "That's different." Silence stretched between us. I could hear my heartbeat again, loud and unsteady. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said finally, setting his mug down on a side table. "If that's what you're thinking." I didn't believe him. Not entirely, but something about his tone, steady, almost weary, made me hesitate. "Then why bring me here?" I asked. "Because you were half conscious on the street, bleeding, wearing a wedding dress, and begging me not to call the cops." He gave a faint shrug. "You don't leave someone like that on the sidewalk." "Even I'm not that cold." "Even you," I repeated quietly. "So you admit you're cold?" He smiled again, small and humorless. "I admit a lot of things, but not to strangers." He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. I caught the faint scent of his cologne again. Dark, smoky, expensive. My instincts screamed to step back, but I couldn't move. His presence had gravity, pulling me toward him whether I liked it or not. "You ran away from something," he said softly. "That much is obvious. I'm not telling you anything." "I don't need you to." His voice lowered. "People like you always leave a trail. If I wanted to know, I could find out before breakfast." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, and the certainty in it chilled me. "Why would you care?" I asked. "You don't even know me." "True," he said. "But you crashed into my car, and I hate unfinished business." There it was, that edge in his voice. Controlled power. The kind men built empires on, or buried enemies with. I swallowed hard. "So what now? You want me to pay for the damage?" He chuckled under his breath. "Money doesn't interest me." "Then what does?" His gaze held mine, long enough to make my skin prickle. Honesty. The word hung in the air, heavy and strange. He studied me for another moment, then turned toward the window. "You can leave." The elevator's at the end of the hall. That caught me off guard. I blinked. "You're letting me go?" He didn't turn around. "I don't keep people here against their will. But, although," he added, glancing over his shoulder, "if you walk out there wearing that shirt and nothing else, The doorman will have questions I don't feel like answering, so maybe get dressed first. Heat flooded my face. Where's my dress? He smirked faintly. Destroyed. It was covered in blood and asphalt. You can thank my housekeeper for the shirt. I exhaled shakily. You really think I'm going to believe you're just some good Samaritan? He turned fully now, his gaze sharp and unreadable. I don't care what you believe. Then he walked past me, brushing close enough that I could feel the shift in the air between us. I wanted to move, to speak, to ask him who he really was, but my throat closed up. He stopped at the door and said without looking back, "The name's Luca, just that. No last name, no explanation." But the way he said it made something in me shiver, like the name itself carried weight I didn't yet understand. When the door shut behind him, the silence returned, thick and easy. I sat back on the bed, staring at the skyline, trying to breathe. Luca, whoever he wasn't ordinary. The way he moved, the way people must obey him without question. It wasn't normal, and the way his eyes lingered on me, it wasn't pity. It wasn't desire either. It was something colder, something watchful. I should have left right then. I should have taken the elevator, walked out the front door, and disappeared before he decided I was worth his time. But instead, I sat there, trembling in his shirt, staring at the city below, wondering who he really was, and why fate had decided to make our worlds collide. Outside, the sky had turned gold. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring again, and for the second time in 24 hours, I had no idea where my life was heading. The smell of coffee and something warm, eggs maybe, or toast, pulled me out of my restless thoughts. I'd spent the last hour pacing around the penthouse, debating whether I should actually leave. Every part of me screamed to go, but something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the faint sense that stepping outside that door would drop me right back into the chaos I'd tried to escape. When I finally wandered out of the guest room, I followed the scent down a hall lined with dark paintings, heavy, moody, expensive. Everything about this place whispered power and isolation. The kitchen wasn't really a kitchen. It was a minimalist dream. Marble counters, black steel, and glass. Luca sat at the long island table, sleeves rolled up, reading something on a tablet. There were 2 plates on the counter, one empty, one waiting. Without looking up, he said, "You're awake." It wasn't a question. "I thought you said I could leave," I replied quietly. He tapped the screen, set the tablet down, and finally looked up. "You can. After breakfast." "I'm not hungry." His gaze flicked briefly to the untouched plate. "You haven't eaten in over a day. Sit down." The command in his voice made me stiffen. I wasn't used to being ordered around, not like that. But his tone carried the same steady authority as before, the kind that made resistance feel useless. So I sat. He didn't say anything for a while, just poured another cup of coffee and slid it toward me. "It's not poisoned," I met his eyes. "I didn't think it was." "You did." He smirked slightly, lifting his cup. Most people do when they realize where they are. Something in my chest tightened. "Where I am?" His gaze lingered on me for a moment before he said, "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" He leaned back in his chair. "This building belongs to me. Every floor, every door, every inch of it. The people downstairs don't ask questions because they know better. The police don't come up here without calling first." I swallowed. "You sound proud of that." He tilted his head, amused. "I'm stating facts." I wanted to ask more, but something in his expression warned me not to. I focused on my plate instead. The silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "So, tell me, Evelyn Hayes, if that's even your name, who were you running from?" I froze mid-bite. "I told you told me nothing." His voice cut clean through the air. "You think I didn't notice the bruise under your wrist? The way your eyes flicked toward the window every few seconds last night? You're not just running away from a wedding. You're running from someone." I stared at him, heart pounding. "You think you know everything?" He gave a slow, measured smile. "No, but I'm very good at finding out." The way he said it wasn't boastful. It was factual, like he'd done it 1,000 times. I pushed my plate away. "I don't owe you an explanation." "True," he said, "but you might owe yourself one." That struck deeper than I expected. His voice softened. "Was it an arranged marriage?" The air left my lungs. "Why do you care?" He shrugged slightly. "Because you looked like someone trying to claw her way out of a cage." That did it. The walls I'd been holding up cracked. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," I said quietly. "It was supposed to save my family. My father's business was collapsing, and the man I was marrying, he had money, influence, everything we needed, but he also had control. He wanted me as part of the deal. Not for love, not even for companionship, just possession." Luca said nothing, just watched me with that same unreadable calm. I thought I could handle it. I continued, voice trembling, until I saw his face at the altar. "And I realized if I said I do, I'd never see myself again. The silence after that was suffocating. Luca finally leaned forward, elbows on the table. So you ran? I ran. He nodded once, slowly. Good, I blinked. Good? Better to ruin your life on your own terms than let someone else do it for you. The words shouldn't have meant anything coming from a man like him, but somehow they did. I studied him. What about you? You talk like someone who knows what that feels like. A shadow passed over his expression, gone almost as soon as it appeared. Maybe I do, I hesitated. You said your name's Luca. What do you do? He chuckled quietly, setting down his cup. That's a complicated question. I can handle complicated. He looked at me, really looked at me this time. His eyes darkened. Not with anger, but with something deeper. Let's just say I make problems disappear. The words hung heavy between us. I felt a chill trace my spine. You mean like a fixer? He smiled faintly. Something like that. But his eyes said otherwise. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city light spilled across his face, catching the faint scar near his temple, the tension in his jaw. He wasn't a man of half-truths. He was a man who spoke just enough to make you realize how little you actually knew. Finally, he broke the silence. You can stay here for the day if you need to figure things out. My driver can take you wherever you want after that. You trust me to leave without causing trouble? I asked. He smirked. If you cause trouble, you'll find out I don't deal with it twice. I should have been terrified, but instead I felt something else, curiosity. The dangerous kind. Why are you being nice to me? I asked quietly. He gave a small, humorless laugh. Nice isn't really my thing. But I know what it's like to run out of places to go. Our eyes met. And for the first time since I'd met him, there was no hardness there, just something raw, fleeting, almost vulnerable. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Eat, rest, then decide what you want to do next. And before I could say anything, he walked away. His footsteps steady, his presence still heavy in the air long after he was gone. I sat there in silence, staring at the untouched plate, my pulse unsteady. Whoever Luca was, he wasn't just a stranger I'd crashed into. He was something else entirely. Someone powerful, dangerous, and yet oddly human. And for reasons I couldn't explain, part of me didn't want to leave just yet. By afternoon, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. The penthouse felt too large, too silent, too filled with the presence of the man whose name I couldn't stop thinking about. Luca. It was strange how easily that name took root in my thoughts, sharp as a blade, heavy as a promise. I found my ruined wedding dress folded neatly inside a black bag by the bedroom door. He hadn't lied. It was shredded beyond saving, streaked with dirt and torn lace. A note sat on top of it, written in sharp, masculine handwriting. Elevators unlocked. Drivers waiting. Don't look back. The words looked casual, but they pulsed with something that wasn't casual at all. Warning, maybe. Or permission. I wasn't sure which. I changed into a pair of jeans and a borrowed coat from the closet. Too big, but it would do. And stepped into the elevator. The descent was slow, almost unnervingly so. Every metallic hum echoed in my chest like a heartbeat. The moment the doors opened, a rush of cool air hit me. The lobby was marble and glass, as pristine as the rest of the building. A uniformed man near the entrance nodded silently. The black car waited at the curb. Same Bentley. Same glossy surface I'd crashed into less than 24 hours ago. The driver, a broad man with slicked back hair, opened the rear door for me. Miss Hayes, he said, voice smooth but unreadable. I hesitated. You know that's not my name, don't you? His lips twitched, almost a smile. Doesn't matter. He told me to get you wherever you need to go. Where's Luca? Meeting. Something about the way he said it told me not to ask more. I climbed in, clutching my coat around me. The city rolled past the windows, glass towers and silent crowds, all moving too fast, too purposefully. My life, by contrast, was suspended in the quiet between chaos and consequence. Stop here, I said, when we reached the edge of a quiet park. The driver pulled over without question. I stepped out, taking a long breath of cold air. Freedom, finally. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure what came next. I walked aimlessly for a while, the wind tugging at my hair. For the first time since the church, I tried to think clearly. I couldn't go home. My father would drag me back to the altar in handcuffs if he had to. I couldn't stay with friends. He'd find me there too. I was alone, completely, terrifyingly alone. Then I felt it, that prickle at the back of my neck. The sense of being watched. I stopped walking. Looked around. Nothing. Just a few strangers crossing the street. A couple arguing near the benches. But the feeling didn't fade. Then I saw him. Across the street, half hidden behind a newsstand. A man in a gray suit. Too still, too focused. His eyes flicked toward me once, then away, like he was pretending not to look. I turned sharply and started walking the other direction. He followed. Every step I took, his pace matched. When I crossed the street, so did he. My heartbeat quickened. my mind scrambling for logic. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he just looked like someone from the wedding. Then I heard him call my name, my real name. Clara. The sound of it froze me. No one here should have known that name. No one except the people I'd left behind. I turned slowly. It was Samuel, my fiancé's right-hand man, the one who'd smiled politely through every engagement dinner, the one who had always been too polite, too observant. Clara, he said again, approaching with that calm, poisonous voice I remembered too well. Do you have any idea what you've done? I took a step back. Stay away from me. Your father's losing his mind, he said. Do you know how humiliated he is? How furious your fiancé is? You think you can just disappear? My pulse hammered. I don't belong to him, he smiled coldly. You don't get to decide that. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising, his expression carefully blank. You're coming with me, Clara. We can do this quietly. Or he didn't finish, because suddenly, he wasn't holding me anymore. In one brutal motion, a hand clamped on his shoulder, twisted, and shoved him hard against the brick wall. Samuel gasped, his arm pinned behind his back. Luca, he stood behind him, his face carved in fury, voice low enough to make the air vibrate. You just made a very bad mistake. Samuel sputtered, trying to turn his head. Who the hell? Don't. The word was a warning, sharp and absolute. If you touch her again, I'll make sure you never touch anything. I'd never seen violence happen so quietly. Luca didn't raise his voice, didn't even break a sweat, but the danger radiated from him like heat. Luca, I whispered, stepping forward, my heart racing. Please don't. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed locked on Samuel. You have 5 seconds to disappear before I decide you're not worth keeping alive. Samuel's face drained of color. You don't know who you're threatening. Luca smiled faintly, a terrifying kind of calm in it. That's the difference between you and me. I know exactly who I'm threatening. He released him suddenly, shoving him back. Samuel stumbled, eyes wide, breath ragged. This isn't over, he hissed, retreating fast. Luca didn't answer. He just watched him vanish into the crowd. Then, slowly, he turned toward me. You shouldn't have left the car, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. How did you even— I had the driver follow you, he interrupted, his tone unchanging. I don't trust strangers who fall out of nowhere and bleed on my car seats. Despite the fear still clawing at me, I almost laughed. That's comforting. He stepped closer, eyes dark with something unreadable. Who was he? My ex-fiancé's assistant, I whispered. He must have been following me since the church. Luca's jaw tightened. What's his name? Samuel, he nodded once. He won't bother you again. Something in the finality of that sentence made me shiver. What does that mean? It means, he said, voice low, you're not going back there. I wasn't planning to. Good. For a moment, we just stood there. Two strangers bound by chaos neither of us had chosen. The wind lifted a strand of my hair, and his gaze softened slightly as he reached out, almost absent-mindedly, and brushed it away from my face. His hand lingered just long enough to make my breath hitch. You really have a talent for trouble, he murmured. I met his eyes. And you have a talent for showing up right before disaster. That earned the faintest smirk. Maybe I like the timing. He turned then, gesturing toward the car waiting at the curb. Let's go, I hesitated. Where? Someplace safer than here. And if I say no? His expression didn't change, but his tone did. It dropped lower, quieter, almost dangerous. Then I'll follow you anyway. For a long moment I held his gaze, then exhaled, defeated. I climbed into the car. He followed, shutting the door behind him. As the city faded outside, I realized something terrifying. I'd escaped one prison, but I was willingly stepping into another, and for reasons I couldn't explain. Part of me didn't want to leave this one. The drive was silent. The city lights melted into streaks of gold and shadow outside the tinted glass. I sat in the back seat beside Luca, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to ignore the quiet thunder in my chest. He didn't speak, didn't look at me, didn't even move much, just watched the world slide by with that same unreadable calm. But there was something different in his posture now, a tension that hadn't been there before. I wondered if it was anger or worry. When the car finally slowed, I glanced up to see we were far from the heart of the city. The streets here were narrower, quieter, lined with tall, aging buildings. The car turned into a gated driveway, and the iron gate shut behind us with a sound that felt final. The house we stopped in front of wasn't what I expected. No sleek glass, no luxury skyline view, just an old brick townhouse, unassuming from the outside, lights warm behind drawn curtains. Where are we? I asked. One of my safe houses, Luca said, stepping out of the car. No one knows about this place unless I want them to. Safe house. The phrase lingered uneasily in my mind. He held the door open for me, and I stepped inside. It was beautiful. In a quiet, lived-in way, wooden floors, leather furniture, faint smell of rain and wood polish. A small fire flickered in the corner, throwing shadows across the walls. Everything about it felt deliberately calm. like a man's attempt at peace in a life that didn't allow any. Luca shrugged off his jacket and draped it over the arm of the couch. "You'll stay here for now. I don't need to hide," I said softly. He gave me a look that made my stomach twist. "You think that man in the park was alone?" The truth hit me hard. I didn't answer. "I'll have someone watch the area," he said. "If they come near, I'll know." "Why are you doing this for me?" I asked. "You don't even know me." He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Maybe I don't like seeing people hunted." It sounded simple. But the weight behind his words said otherwise. I looked around the room again, trying to find something to hold on to, something normal. My eyes caught on the framed photograph on a nearby shelf, a black and white picture of a young boy beside a man who looked a lot like Luca. The resemblance was uncanny. Except the boy was smiling. Wide, bright, innocent, Luca noticed my gaze. For the first time, he looked away. "My brother," he said quietly. "What happened to him?" His jaw tightened. "He's gone." I waited, but he didn't elaborate. The air between us thickened with the kind of silence that came from old wounds. "I'm sorry," I said softly. He nodded once. "Don't be." He walked toward the window, watching the rain begin to fall in soft streaks. The flicker of the firelight cast his profile in gold and shadow. He looked tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from living too long in the dark. I didn't know what possessed me to speak next. But I did. "You're not like I thought." He glanced over his shoulder. "And what did you think I was?" "A man who didn't care about anyone," he smirked faintly. "Maybe I don't, but I didn't believe him. Not after the way he'd looked when he saw Samuel's hand on me. Not after the quiet anger that still simmered beneath his calm exterior." I sank onto the couch, watching him. "Who are you really, Luca?" For a moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned toward me. "You really want to know?" "Yes." He walked closer, stopping just in front of me. The firelight flickered behind him, outlining his silhouette in a halo of orange and shadow. "I run things," he said finally. "Businesses, people, money, information. The kind that never sees the light of day." The way he said it, flat, matter of fact, made the words even heavier. "So, you're—" He gave a quiet laugh. "Say it. Mafia?" The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. That's a word people like to use when they don't understand what power looks like. My breath caught. "Then what should I call you?" His eyes met mine, dark and unwavering. "A man who built his empire from ashes." The fire cracked softly. For a moment, neither of us moved. "You're afraid," he said suddenly, voice low. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. "Should I be?" "Always," he said. Then after a pause, "But not of me." I didn't know what that meant. I only knew that when he said it, something in me loosened. He sat down across from me, leaning back, studying me with quiet intensity. "Tell me about him," he said. "Who?" "The man you were going to marry." I hesitated, then exhaled. "His name is Richard, my father's business partner's son. On paper, he was perfect, educated, polite, wealthy. But underneath," I looked down, fingers twisting together. "He liked control, the kind that didn't stop at words. Every choice I made was filtered through what he wanted, what I wore, who I saw, how I smiled." Luca's eyes darkened. "Did he hurt you?" I shook my head, then stopped. "Not in ways people could see." The quiet that followed was different this time. Colder, heavier. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "If he comes near you again, he won't walk away." I swallowed hard. "You can't just—" "I can," he said, his voice low and absolute. "And I will." I wanted to protest, to tell him that violence wasn't the answer. But part of me, the part that still trembled from the memory of Samuel's grip, didn't entirely disagree. "Why do you care what happens to me?" I whispered. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Because people like him think fear gives them ownership. I don't like being reminded of that." There it was again, that shadow behind his words. Pain. Memory. Something long buried. Outside, thunder rolled softly. The rain picked up, tapping gently against the windows. I stood and walked toward the fire, letting its warmth chase away the chill that had settled in my bones. "You should get some sleep," he said after a while. "You'll be safe here." I turned toward him. "What about you?" He smiled faintly. "I don't sleep much. Because you can't? Or because you don't want to?" His eyes met mine again, steady and dark. "Because dreams are for people who have something left to lose." The words hung between us like smoke. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain, and the fire crackling softly behind us. And though I knew I should have been terrified of the man sitting across from me, the man whose world ran on power and silence, I wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt something that almost resembled safety. The rain turned into a storm by nightfall. It wasn't gentle anymore. It roared, shaking the windows and crawling under the floorboards. Lightning flashed through the curtains. briefly illuminating the edges of the room in sharp, cold light. Sleep didn't come easily. I had been lying on the couch in one of Luca's oversized shirts, listening to the storm tear through the city, when I heard a door open somewhere down the hall. His footsteps were quiet, but heavy, measured. I didn't turn immediately, but I felt him before I saw him. "You're awake," he said softly. I couldn't sleep. He walked closer, his shadow falling across the room. His white shirt was half unbuttoned, sleeves rolled to his forearms, hair a little tousled like he'd run a hand through it too many times. There was something raw about him in that moment, something human that stripped away the layers of control and power he wore like armor. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and leaned against the counter, the amber liquid glowing faintly in the dim light. "You're not used to quiet, are you?" I asked. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Quiet makes you hear things you don't want to." I understood that more than I wanted to admit. For a while, we just listened to the rain. It pounded against the roof like a warning. Finally, I said, "When you said you built your empire from ashes, what did you mean?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze was distant, almost lost. "When I was 17, he said finally, "my father owed money to men who didn't forgive debts. They came for him, for all of us. I was the only one who made it out alive." I turned toward him, my breath catching. "Luca." He took a sip of his drink, eyes locked on the window. "I learned early that power isn't given. It's taken, piece by piece, so I took it back." There was no pride in his voice, just cold remembrance. "What happened to the men who... They disappeared," he said simply. "No one ever found them." The thunder cracked overhead, sharp and violent, as if the world itself reacted to his confession. "I'm not a good man," he said after a long pause. "Whatever you think you see when you look at me, you shouldn't." "I didn't ask for a good man," I whispered. "I asked for the truth." That made him look at me. Really look. And for a heartbeat, it felt like something shifted. He set the glass down and walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "Why are you here, really?" he asked. "You could have gone to anyone. The police, a friend, a relative, but you ended up crashing into me." "Maybe it wasn't an accident," I said before I could stop myself. His brow furrowed slightly. "You think fate put you in my path?" I hesitated, my heart thudding in my chest. I think I was already running long before that wedding. Maybe I just didn't know where to. The air between us grew thick again, charged like the storm outside. Luca stepped closer. "And now? Now I don't know if I'm safe. Or trapped." His eyes flickered. The faintest trace of pain there. "Maybe both," I swallowed, looking away. The storm raged harder outside, the lights flickering for a moment before steadying again. "You can stay as long as you want," he said finally, voice low. "But understand, being near me changes everything. It doesn't go back." I met his eyes again. "Maybe I don't want to go back." He stared at me for a long moment. And then, without warning, the lights went out. The power cut through the house, leaving us in the dark except for the fire still glowing faintly in the hearth. I gasped quietly, startled, and he instinctively reached out, his hand finding mine in the dark. "It's just the storm," he murmured. "The generator will kick in soon." But neither of us pulled away. His hand was warm, steady, grounding. The touch sent a strange current through me, something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not comfort, something in between. Lightning flashed again, and for that split second, I saw his face. So close I could see the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the faint scar that ran from his temple to his cheekbone. He didn't move, didn't speak. The silence pressed around us until it became almost unbearable. And then, softly, he said, "You shouldn't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're trying to find the man underneath the monster." I didn't answer. Because I was. The generator kicked in a moment later, humming back to life. The lights returned, softer this time, golden and flickering. But neither of us stepped back. He was still holding my hand, and when he finally released it, it felt like something vital had been taken with it. "I'll have someone bring you clothes tomorrow," he said, his voice quieter now. "There's a guest room upstairs if you want privacy." I nodded slowly, trying to breathe through the rush of emotion in my chest. As I turned to go, he added, "Lock the door, not because you need to, but because you should always remember to." There was no threat in his tone, just the kind of warning that came from someone who'd seen too much. When I reached the top of the stairs, I paused and looked back. He was still there, standing in the glow of the firelight, head slightly bowed, one hand braced against the wall as if fighting something invisible. For the first time, I realized that maybe he wasn't just saving me. Maybe he was trying to save himself. I closed the bedroom door and leaned against it, my heart still pounding. The storm continued outside, relentless and wild. I pressed my fingers to my lips and tried to steady my breath, but all I could think of was the feel of his hand around mine. It wasn't supposed to matter. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, But in that house, in that storm, surrounded by danger and ghosts, it did, and I knew deep down that nothing about my life, or his, would ever be the same again. Morning arrived in fragments. Soft light pressed through the curtains, touching the wooden floors with gold. The storm had left behind silence, heavy, humid, and oddly fragile, as if the world was holding its breath. I woke tangled in sheets that weren't mine, the faint scent of smoke and cedar still clinging to the air. For a few precious seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then it hit me. The runaway bride. The crash. Luca. The memory of his hand finding mine in the dark came back like a pulse beneath my skin. I sat up, pressing a palm to my chest, trying to slow my heartbeat. There was a small knock at the door, soft but deliberate. "Come in," I said, my voice rough from sleep. A woman stepped inside. A stranger. She was around my age, maybe younger, dressed neatly in black with her hair tied back. She carried a folded pile of clothes. "Mr. Romano asked me to bring these to you," she said, setting them down at the foot of the bed. "Breakfast is ready downstairs." Her tone was polite, but there was a flicker in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe even warning. "Thank you," I murmured. She nodded once before leaving, the door clicking softly behind her. The clothes were simple but expensive. Black jeans, a soft gray sweater, and a leather jacket that looked like it had been tailored to fit me before I was even born. I hesitated for a moment, wondering what kind of woman wore things like these, then slipped them on. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the reflection staring back. I didn't look like a bride who'd fled her wedding. I looked like someone new. Someone who had burned her past down and walked away from the ashes. Downstairs, the house smelled like coffee and toast. Luca was at the table, newspaper spread open, sleeves rolled up. The morning light caught the edge of his jaw, his dark hair still slightly damp. He looked up when he saw me, and something flickered in his eyes. Something that disappeared almost as quickly as it came. "You found the clothes," he said. "They fit," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "They should." He folded the newspaper carefully, setting it aside. "Eat something." I picked at the toast, not hungry but unwilling to break the silence. "Who was the woman upstairs?" I asked finally. "Clara," he said. "She keeps the place in order. You can trust her. And the others?" "There are no others here," he said simply. "Just us." The words shouldn't have made my stomach twist the way they did. Outside, the sun fought its way through the clouds, catching on the wet pavement beyond the windows. Everything looked cleaner, newer, like the storm had washed the world raw. "You didn't sleep," I said quietly, noticing the faint shadows under his eyes. "I don't need much. Everyone needs rest." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "You sound like someone who still believes peace is earned." "Maybe I do." He looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he stood. "Walk with me." I followed him through the back door, into a small walled courtyard. The rain had stopped completely, but droplets still clung to the vines along the brick walls. The air smelled like wet earth and leaves. Luca stopped by the old stone fountain in the center. The water was still, reflecting the gray morning sky. "When I first bought this place," he said, "it was falling apart. I kept it because it was the only thing that didn't remind me of what I'd lost." "What did you lose?" I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. "My brother used to draw plans for houses like this. Said one day he'd build something that could outlast us both." His gaze drifted to the fountain. "He was 14 when they took him." The way he said it, flat, controlled, hurt more than if he'd shouted, "I'm sorry." I whispered, "Don't be." He looked at me, eyes dark but steady. "You didn't cause it." The wind stirred between us, carrying the faint sound of city traffic beyond the walls. "I used to think if I built enough, controlled enough, maybe I could undo it," he said. "But the truth is, you don't rebuild from loss. You just build around it." I wanted to reach out, to touch his arm, to bridge that invisible distance between us. But something held me back. He turned, catching the hesitation in my eyes. "You're afraid I'll break you." I met his gaze. "You already have." The words slipped out before I could stop them. But they hung there, raw, trembling, honest. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath when he spoke. "You think I haven't already broken myself 100 times over? Maybe that's why I'm still here," I said quietly. "Because I know what it feels like to be cracked open and keep walking." His hand lifted slightly, like he was about to touch me, then stopped halfway. His voice dropped lower. "You should leave while you still can." "I don't want to. You don't understand. If they come after you again, they'll come through me, and I don't play fair." "Then let them try," I said, my heart pounding. "I'm done running." The faintest trace of a smile touched his lips, sad and sharp. "You're dangerous when you mean it." Before I could answer, a phone rang inside the house. Sharp, metallic, breaking the spell. Luca's expression hardened instantly. He turned and strode back toward the door, answering it before the second ring. I followed, stopping in the doorway. He listened silently for several seconds, then said, "Handle it." His voice was colder now, the steel returning. When he hung up, I saw the storm in his eyes again, one that had nothing to do with the weather. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "They found your car." My stomach dropped. "In a police impound," he continued. "Someone's been asking questions. Your fiancé's people, maybe your father's, they're looking for you." My throat went dry. "Then what do we do?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "We disappear before they find this place." "Disappear where?" He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the window where the rain had left streaks of light. "Somewhere I swore I'd never go back to." "Why?" "Because the last time I was there," he said, "I buried someone I loved." The weight of his words hit me like a chill. "Pack your things," he said finally, his tone shifting to command. "We leave in an hour," I nodded, my pulse racing. As he turned away, I caught a glimpse of something beneath the surface of his calm. Fear, not of the men coming for us, but of what he might do to protect me. And as I watched him walk down the hall, I realized something terrifying and undeniable. The moment I'd crashed into his car, I hadn't just escaped one cage, I'd stepped into another one. Only this time, the bars were invisible, and I wasn't sure I wanted to get out. By the time we left the safe house, the sky was beginning to dim again, muted streaks of lavender bleeding into gray. Luca moved with quiet precision, every step measured, every glance sharp. He didn't speak much, just handed me a small duffel bag and said, "Keep your head down." We left through the back alley, his car already waiting, a sleek black vehicle that looked like it belonged to another world. The engine purred to life, low and smooth, and we slid into the night. The city faded quickly. Buildings gave way to open roads, to stretches of quiet land washed in twilight. The silence between us felt thicker than the fog gathering over the hills. I watched the world pass through the window, lights flickering and vanishing behind us. "Where are we going?" I asked after a while. He didn't answer right away. "North," he said finally. "There's a place near the coast. No one will think to look there. Is it safe?" His eyes stayed on the road. "It's where I learned that nothing ever really is." We drove for hours. Neither of us said much, but every now and then, I caught him glancing my way. Once our eyes met, and for a heartbeat too long, neither of us looked away. It was strange. How someone so dangerous could make me feel safer than anyone ever had. As the night deepened, I found myself speaking quietly, not sure why. When I was little, I used to dream about running away. I'd pack a bag with nothing but a book, a flashlight, and a handful of stolen candy. I thought if I could just get far enough, I could start over. Luca's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "Did you ever try?" "Once. I got as far as the train station before I realized I didn't know where to go." He glanced at me, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "You made it farther this time." I smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to drag you into it." "Maybe you didn't," he said, eyes back on the road. "Or maybe we were both already headed for a collision." The words lingered in the air, heavier than they should have been. We stopped at a small roadside motel just past midnight. The sign flickered weakly. 2 rooms left. Luca spoke to the clerk in a low voice, paid in cash, and took the keys. Inside, the air smelled faintly of rain and old pine. It was small, but clean. 2 beds, 1 flickering lamp, and a window that looked out onto the dark stretch of highway. "You should sleep," he said. "We'll move again before dawn." I nodded, but exhaustion and adrenaline warred inside me. I couldn't relax. He noticed, of course. Luca noticed everything. He took off his jacket, draping it over the back of a chair, and sat down opposite me. "You're shaking," he said quietly. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." I hated how easily he saw through me. "You think you know everything about me?" He leaned back slightly. "No, but I know what it looks like when someone's been running too long." His voice wasn't harsh, just steady, grounding. I looked at him across the dim room, the faint yellow light carving shadows along his jaw. "Why do you keep helping me?" "Because I can," he said simply. "That's not an answer." He exhaled, eyes flickering down to the floor for a moment before returning to mine. "Because when I look at you, I remember what it felt like to want out, and not know if I ever could." Something inside me cracked at that. The silence that followed was fragile, intimate in a way that made the air hum. Lightning flickered far off in the distance, faint and ghostly. I didn't realize how close he'd moved until I felt his presence beside me. Quiet, steady, heat radiating between us. "You should rest," he said softly. "I can't," I whispered. "Then don't." His hand brushed mine, light as a question. I didn't pull away. The tension between us felt alive, like a wire drawn too tight. He could have kissed me right then, and God, part of me wanted him to. But he didn't. Instead, he stood slowly, every movement deliberate, controlled. "I'll keep watch," he said. "You take the bed." "You don't have to, I know." His eyes softened. "But I will." He moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer into the darkness beyond. I lay down, but I didn't sleep. I watched him instead. The way he stood, motionless and alert, a silhouette carved out of night. Every now and then, lightning illuminated his face, revealing that same unreadable calm that never seemed to break. At some point, exhaustion finally dragged me under. When I woke, the room was dim with early dawn. Luca was still at the window, shoulders tense, a gun resting loosely in his hand. My breath caught. "What's wrong?" He turned slightly, voice low. "They're close." Panic flared in my chest. "How do you know?" He nodded toward the road. Through the narrow crack in the curtain, I saw 2 dark cars parked just beyond the motel sign. My heart began to pound. "How did they find us?" "Doesn't matter," he said, already moving. "Get your shoes." I grabbed my bag, my hands shaking as I followed him toward the door. He stopped, looking back at me. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." "Luca, don't argue." The tone of his voice left no room for anything else. We slipped out the back of the motel, the gravel crunching softly beneath our feet. The morning was gray and cold, the air thick with fog. Somewhere behind us, a car door slammed. Luca grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the tree line at the edge of the property. We ran, branches whipping past, mud splashing beneath our steps. My heart raced so hard I thought it would tear out of my chest. When we finally stopped, hidden among the trees, he turned to me, breath steady even after the sprint. "You okay?" I nodded, barely. "What now?" He scanned the distance, calculating. "We keep moving east until we reach the coast. There's a safe dock there." "A dock?" He met my gaze. "A boat. I have connections." Of course he did. As he spoke, the fog shifted behind him, catching the faintest outline of headlights sweeping through the trees. "They were closer than I thought." "Luca," I whispered. "I see them." He murmured. His hand went to his gun. "Stay behind me." The sound of engines grew louder, closer. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but his calm steadiness anchored me in place. Then he reached for me, pulling me closer until his lips were at my ear. "If anything happens, run to the water. Don't look back." I wanted to tell him no, that I wouldn't leave him, but before I could, he stepped forward, eyes hardening into the man I'd only glimpsed in shadows, the man people whispered about, the man who had built power out of ruin, Luca Romano. And as the first figure emerged through the fog, I realized something else. This wasn't just about survival anymore. He wasn't just protecting me. He was fighting for something he didn't believe he deserved. And I couldn't walk away from that, not now, not ever. The forest opened into the edge of the world, gray sky stretching over a body of water that looked endless. The docks were old, weathered, half swallowed by fog, the air thick with the smell of salt and rust. Luca didn't slow. He kept my hand in his as we crossed the wooden planks slick with mist, the boards creaking under our weight. The sound of distant engines echoed somewhere behind us, muffled but closing in. "There," he said, pointing to a small boat tied near the end. "Get on." My chest tightened. "What about you?" "I'll follow." "No," I said, shaking my head. "We leave together." He turned to me, his expression hard. "I'm not arguing about this, Evelyn." It was the first time he'd ever said my name aloud. It hit like lightning, sharp, undeniable. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps thundered from behind us. Luca's hand went to his gun. "Stay down," he murmured, his body shifting in front of mine like instinct. Out of the fog, figures emerged. 3, maybe 4 men. Suits, dark coats, hands already on their weapons. Their leader stepped forward, the wind catching his coat, his voice smooth and cold. "You've been hard to find, Romano." Luca smiled faintly, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "You should have stopped looking." "Orders from above," the man said. "You've got something they want." His gaze flicked toward me. "Or rather, someone." I froze. Luca's voice dropped low. "She's not part of your business." "Everything's business," the man said. "You know that better than anyone. The girl's father made promises he couldn't keep. Her marriage was supposed to fix that." My stomach turned to stone. "What are you talking about?" The man smiled thinly. "Your father owed a lot of money, sweetheart. The wedding was the deal. You were the collateral." The dock tilted beneath me. The world seemed to blur. "Luca?" I whispered, but my voice broke. His jaw tightened. "You're not taking her. You think you can stop us?" "I already did." The moment felt suspended in air, silent, weightless. Then everything broke at once. Gunfire erupted. The sound split the sky, loud and merciless. Luca shoved me behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the fog. Wood splintered. The air filled with the sharp tang of gunpowder and salt. "Stay down," he barked. I could see him through the gaps, the precision of his movements, the sheer terrifying calm. He was a storm in human form. Every shot he fired found its mark. 2 men went down. The others hesitated. Luca stepped forward, reloading with cold efficiency. "You don't want to do this," he said. "Walk away." But they didn't. Another shot rang out and I screamed. Luca staggered, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming through his shirt. "Luca!" I crawled toward him, grabbing his arm, but he caught my wrist before I could touch the wound. "Don't," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm fine. You're bleeding. Get to the boat. I'm not leaving you." The look he gave me then was the kind that silenced worlds. "You don't get to die here because of me." Before I could argue, the last of the men lunged from the fog. Luca turned, his shot ringing out, and the man fell. Too close, too fast. The silence that followed was deafening. Luca swayed, the gun slipping from his hand, his breath sharp with pain. I caught him before he fell, my arms around him, blood warm against my skin. "You're okay," I said, my voice trembling. "You're okay." He gave a faint, crooked smile. "You're a terrible liar." "Then stop making me practice." Somewhere behind us, sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. He glanced toward the boat. "We have to go." I helped him up, his weight heavy against me. We stumbled toward the dock's edge, the fog curling around us like smoke. When we reached the boat, I hesitated. "You can't steer like this." "I can." "Luca?" His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek. "You trust me?" The words were raw, quieter than the wind. I nodded, tears burning behind my eyes. "I do," he smiled faintly. "Then don't stop." We climbed aboard. The engine sputtered, coughed, then came alive. The boat cut through the fog, water splashing against the hull. Behind us, the dock grew smaller, swallowed by mist and distance. I pressed a towel against his shoulder, trying to stem the bleeding. "Stay awake," I said, my voice shaking. "You hear me?" His eyes were half-lidded, his voice rough. "You talk too much." "Then talk back," I said, my throat tight. "Don't you dare fade on me now." He laughed once, a quiet, broken sound. "You really don't scare easy, do you?" "Not anymore." For a long while, neither of us spoke. The fog began to lift, revealing the outline of the horizon, a thin line of gold breaking through the gray. "You could have left me," he said after a while. "I didn't want to." "You should have." "Maybe," I said softly. "But I think we both know I wouldn't have made it far." He turned his head, looking at me with that same unreadable expression, the one that felt like gravity. The sun broke through the clouds then, light spilling across the water. It caught in his hair, on his blood-stained shirt, on the faintest trace of a smile tugging at his lips. "You remind me," he said, voice low, "that there's still something worth not destroying." My chest ached, "And you remind me that running doesn't always mean losing." We drifted in silence for a while, the world wide and quiet around us. When the shore finally appeared in the distance, a small, deserted stretch of land, he steered toward it, slow and steady. By the time we reached it, the sirens were gone. The fog was gone. The danger for now was gone. I helped him onto the sand, his weight leaning against me, and we both collapsed there, breathing hard, laughing despite the pain and the blood and the exhaustion. "You really don't know when to quit," I whispered. His eyes met mine, soft and dark and unguarded for once. "Neither do you." The tide rolled in, gentle against our legs, and for the first time since that wedding day, I felt still. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his thumb catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "Evelyn," he murmured. "Yes?" He hesitated, searching for words he wasn't used to saying. "You crashed into my life like a storm." I smiled through the tears. "You were the wreck I didn't see coming." He laughed quietly, then winced from the pain. "Rest," I said, leaning over him, pressing my hand to his wound. "We'll figure out the rest later." His eyes closed, but his hand found mine and held on, firm, grounding, alive. And as the waves whispered against the shore, I realized something simple and terrifying and true. I hadn't just run from a life that wasn't mine. I'd run straight into the one I was meant to find, the one that began with a crash. And maybe, if the world was kind, would end with something like peace. The sea was quieter now. It always was in the mornings. I stood barefoot on the small stretch of sand behind the house. the one that barely counted as a beach, but felt like home anyway. The waves rolled in gentle, unhurried, and the sun lifted itself over the horizon in slow gold strokes, painting everything warm. A year. A whole year since the night we left everything burning behind us. The house we lived in wasn't much. A whitewashed cottage perched on the edge of the coast, with ivy crawling up its side and salt stains on the windows. We'd bought it from an old fisherman who didn't ask questions. I liked that about him. Around here, people knew how to mind their own ghosts. I heard the floorboards creak behind me. Luca stepped out onto the porch, his shirt unbuttoned halfway, the early light turning his scars into silver. He still moved like a shadow, silent, purposeful, but there was something different now. The sharpness was still there, but it no longer cut everyone in its path. He held 2 mugs of coffee. One for him, one for me. "Didn't think you'd be up this early," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Couldn't sleep," I murmured, taking the cup from his hand. "Dreams again. The same ones? Sometimes they change, but the ending's always the same. I'm running. You're bleeding. We're both trying not to die." He stepped closer, brushing his thumb over my wrist. "You're not running anymore?" "No," I said quietly, "but it still feels like I might." He smiled, faint and tired, the kind of smile that had learned how to survive. "Then I'll just keep finding you." I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, the familiar rhythm that had pulled me through every night I thought I couldn't breathe. We stood there in silence, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled. After a while, I said, "Do you ever miss it?" "What?" "The chaos. The life you left behind." He took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Sometimes," he admitted. "It's hard to unlearn who you were. But then I look at you, and I remember why I had to." I turned toward him. "You ever regret it?" He shook his head. "I regret waiting so long to choose differently." For a long moment, the only sound was the ocean. A small boat bobbed near the dock, a relic of our escape, now used for fishing, nothing more. The gun that once lived under the floorboards had been melted down months ago, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of that world but memory. Sometimes I caught him watching the horizon, eyes distant, as if he still expected something to rise from it. A ship, a shadow, a past that refused to stay buried. But it never came. That morning, though, there was something on the water. A figure in a small motorboat, slowing as it neared the dock. My stomach tightened, the coffee suddenly bitter on my tongue. Luca noticed. He set his cup down, instincts flickering awake like a reflex he couldn't kill. "It's okay," I said quickly. "Probably just a fisherman." He didn't look convinced. "Stay here." He walked down to the dock, shoulders straight, the faint wind tugging at his shirt. I watched as he spoke with the man on the boat. Words I couldn't hear, gestures small and guarded. Then he reached into his pocket, handed something over, and the man nodded, pushing off back toward the open sea. When Luca returned, I asked, "Who was that?" "Old contact. Wanted to make sure we were still alive." "Are we?" I asked softly. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "More than we used to be." Later that day, we went into the nearby town, the kind of place with one main road, a bakery that smelled like cinnamon, and children who played barefoot until the sun dipped low. No one knew who we were. No one cared. They called us the quiet couple who lived by the coast. Sometimes, at night, we still talked about the beginning, about that impossible, stupid, beautiful crash that changed everything. He'd tease me about how I ruined his car. I'd remind him how he ruined my wedding. We'd both end up laughing until it didn't hurt anymore, because that was the thing about surviving. It didn't erase the past. It just made room for the possibility of something better. That evening, as the sky turned the color of bruised peaches and the first stars blinked awake, Luca came up behind me while I was washing dishes. He slid his arms around my waist, his breath warm against my neck. "You know," he murmured, "if you ever decide to run again, give me a head start this time." I laughed, turning to face him. "And why would I run?" He looked down at me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Because it's who you are." I shook my head. "Not anymore." He kissed me then, slow, deliberate, like the world had finally stopped spinning. When he pulled back, I whispered, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That crash wasn't an accident." His brow lifted. "No?" It was the universe being reckless. For once, it worked in our favor. He smiled, low and quiet, then kissed my forehead. "Let's not test its patience again." Outside, the sea whispered against the shore. Inside, the world was small but whole. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I was running toward or away from anything. I was simply here, with him, alive, unbroken, and sometimes that was enough.